Could this be a possible allyship I could have with some of MAGA? Let's talk about it. Hey there, folks. This is Javier here, coming to you live at 3:55 a.m. I did my other video about Charlie Kirk, which I actually want to redo because my camera came out awful in that video, but I hope I got my point out in that video, and I might redo it. But aside from that, I came across this article, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit because as somebody who is not in the conservative movement like myself, and somebody who is actually opposed to the conservative movement like myself, I wanted to talk about this article a little bit. And this article came up about, Tucker Carlson, a guy who I have great opposition to. And he is, in my opinion, one of the worst of the right-wing grifters, especially targeting young people and especially targeting young men. This article came out and said, hot, Tucker Carlson isn't just spreading conspiracy theories. He's creating a whole new political reality that will shock America. What if the most influential media figure in America is fueling a political crisis by spreading dangerous lies? Tucker Carlson, once the king of conservative television, is now amplifying some of the most disturbing conspiracy theories of our time, and his reach is vast. This is terrifying. It says that his reach is vast, and honestly, that's really, really scary. The cost of this dangerous rhetoric, a fractured democracy, a polarized republic, and an entire nation teetering on the edge of the truth of itself. Can America survive the aftermath of his influence? Yeah, I'm getting a little heated here. And it's true. It's very scary. I'm going to be real with you guys. It's very, very scary how much influence Tucker Carlson has over young men and the minds of millions and millions of young men in this nation, and millions of people in this nation in general, especially young people. He's popular because of his conspiracies, because of his rhetoric, because of his beliefs, and it all started during COVID. It all started when he started to be this polarizing figure during COVID, opening up the door to all these conspiracies and all these beliefs and ideas, etc., etc. And now he's been doing the same thing with Israel. He did the same thing, it's the reason he platformed Nick Fuentes, who is the I guess, if you will, somewhat of a neo-Nazi. He platformed Milo, who was, the guy that, is making all this conspiracies about gay people. He platformed, I think he platformed literal Holocaust deniers. But lately, his big thing has been about Israel, and creating all these conspiracies about Israel. Most recently, calling Israel the most violent nation in the world, and even worse, on his show, calling for a push for DNA tests on Jews, which is sinister and evil, satanic. And this is one reason podcasters like him, like Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, etc., is why anti-Semitism is spreading so vastly. Why so many young people on the right are becoming more and more against Israel, and more honestly prone to believing conspiracies about Jews, particularly about Jews, and it's getting worse and worse, but not just conspiracies about Jews, conspiracies about COVID, conspiracies about gay people, conspiracies about the Holocaust, and ultimately, mostly, conspiracies about Jews and conspiracies about Israel. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. So what Tucker Carlson, he is the ultimate grifter of grifters. He is platforming to millions of young men nationwide. Young men, precious young minds, like myself, and he's platforming these conspiracies, and these conspiracies are becoming very, very popularized among young men and young people like myself. And it's honestly becoming very disturbing and scary to watch, because this is moving a whole generation really, really, really far to the right. And it's very scary in so many ways. In so many ways, it's moving a generation very hard to the right, and to the point where they're becoming, believing all this, prone to believing all this stuff about COVID and Jews and the Holocaust and gay people and other things. And it's getting, and he's one of the biggest promoters of it. And he's being kind of like touted as this like voice of reason, or if you will, which is really scary. But the reality of the matter is Tucker Carlson's media influence is getting vast, it's getting big, it's getting dangerous, and it's getting scary. And the reality of the matter is he is not even part of the MAGA movement. So I know, as somebody who is not part of the conservative movement, I know a little about it. And I want to discuss it a little bit. So the reality of the matter is that the conservative movement, from my understanding, is very divided. There's some fractions I will side with more than others. I am not part of the isolationist America First, if you will, Tucker Carlson faction. I am as far away from that as possible. I believe that is among the worst of the fractions of the MAGA movement. And the most prone to the worst and most dangerous of conspiracies that are being spread to young men and young minds everywhere. So, at the end of the day, I lean toward, and I'm not saying I'm part of it because I'm not, but if I were to side with, I would side with, say, the Ben Shapiro fraction of the conservative movement that is still with Israel. Even, I dare say, Mike Huckabee fraction of the conservative movement. People like that who I will be more prone to side with. And because at the end of the day, these are people that are like, at the end of the day, sticking up for Israel. Or maybe even other parts of the conservative movement that are opposing the lies that Tucker Carlson is telling about other people, about other groups, about other conspiracies, who actually believe in science and things like that, And it's getting really, really dark out there when it comes to the kind of lies and propaganda that Tucker is spreading to millions of young people. So I titled this video at the beginning, A Possible Allyship with MAGA. Let me explain what I mean. I am at the point where I'm willing to help, support, and promote any MAGA influencer who is going up against Tucker Carlson. That'd be Mike Huckabee, that'd be Ben Shapiro, that'd be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even if it's Dan Bongino, I will support and stand with Dan Bongino against this dangerous grifter, Tucker Carlson. And honestly, the people like him, people like Tucker Carlson, such as the Nick Fuenteses and the other, hard right, isolationist, America First crowd, if you will. So when Dan Bongino came back to podcasting, his first thing was he wanted to take upon the so-called bums and grifters that were tearing apart the MAGA movement from the inside. And what I've seen is that Carlson is, from my understanding, is at the top of that list. He is one of those bums and grifters that are tearing apart, that are so-called, supposedly being accused of tearing apart the MAGA movement from the inside. And at the end of the day, this is really bad. It's really scary. It's really not scary. I'm not sorry. That was a brain fart. I'm sorry. It's really we would think it's a good thing, but at the end of the day, these people are taking the current MAGA movement and trying to make it a lot worse. They're trying to move it even further and further and further to the right. People like Carlson, people like Fuentes, and things like that. And by the way, I want to do another video on Fuentes, calling on his supporters to vote Democrat and calling on his supporters to not vote at all. I need to discuss that a little bit. But the point is, people like this want to move the party more and more and more and more right-wing. And honestly, to the point where, like, people like, let's just say, Officer Tatum, Ben Shapiro, people like even Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz. Unbelievable, right? Even Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz are at the point where they're like, even Dan Bongino, at the point where they're like, this is not where we want our movement to go. This is not where we want our movement to go. So, as somebody who leans Democrat, I believe in democratic policies and democratic values. But as someone who leads Democrat, I'm willing to stand with, say, a Ted Cruz. I'm willing to stand with, say, a Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino, Mike Huckabee, and Officer Tatum. I'm willing to stand with them to oppose these dangerous conspiracy fueling grifters such as Tucker Carlson. I'm willing to stand with them as long as they speak out against these dangerous grifters such as Carlson, Fuentes, people like that. And not because I support the conservative movement, I don't, but because I don't want to see the mega coalition party move even more and more and more far right and taking so many young souls with them. That's really scary. That's a really scary direction that our country is going toward. So I will, at the end of the day, have to stand with who I have to stand with. I will, at the end of the day, stand with a Dan Bongino or Mike Huckabee or, a Ben Shapiro, people like that, who are looking at the likes of Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and people and grifters like these and saying, we don't want the movement to move to their extreme right. You see what I'm saying? We don't want the movement to move to their extreme right. We don't want them to be part of our movement, etc., etc. So if Dan Bongino or Mike Huckabee or Ben Shapiro or people like that will call out and speak out against the likes of Tucker Carlson or the Nick Fuenteses or the crowds like that are taking so many young male souls down that line with them, I'm going to stand with them. And that also brings me to a relatively interesting article. And I know Mike Huckabee, somebody that it's funny how in my past I used to really support him. He used to be my favorite candidate in my past, in my conservative days. Now we seem to be meeting up again on the other side of the road, allying against grifters like this. It's crazy. But it's funny how I ran into this article about Dan Bongino versus Tucker Carlson's brother. And apparently they are having this war right now. They are exchanging, there's heated exchanges happening between them and all that. And like I said, when Dan Bongino came back, the first thing he said was, I'm going to be taking on these right-wing bums and grifters and losers that are trying to tear apart the movement within. And Tucker Carlson and the Fuentes and people like that are one of them. So what started out as a seemingly typical exchange between conservative voices has turned into a no-holds-barred online feud that's now trending across social media, that's trending across social platforms. Former FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino and Buckley Carlson, a brother of very controversial commentator Tucker Carlson, exchanged scorching insults that have exposed the tensions in the conservative media's inner circle. Bongino lambasted Buckley with personal attacks, calling a trust fund horrible baby, and the backlash continued to escalate as critics piled on. This isn't just a bitter spat, it's revealing of the glimpse in raging culture wars within the right-wing movement that could reshape its future. Now, someone might say, why don't we if we're on the left, we'd just stand back and watch the show. I think we need to take sides. And my argument for that, if we're taking sides, is we need to take sides to prevent the right from getting more right. We need to take sides to prevent the right wing from moving even more right wing. Even Dan Bongino, that right wing loudmouth podcaster, alpha male podcaster, is at this point the point where he's taking on these folks. He's taking on these folks that are trying to move the party even more and more and more right wing. So at the end of the day, we could either just sit on the sidelines and watch, or we can say, yes, Shapiro is right about Carlson. Yes, Mike Huckabee is right about Carlson. Yes, Dan Bongino is right about Carlson. Carlson is dangerous. He's taking too many young minds down with him. He's spreading the internet waves of conspiracies. He's got way too much influence, and we need to take any stand against him we can take. It's not all about Donald Trump. It's not all about things like people like that. It's not all about Donald Trump and beating Donald Trump. It's about protecting our country. It's about protecting our young people. It's about protecting our next generation from the dangerous influences that are out there targeting young minds. And if they're teaching our young people to be anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, teaching our young people that, Israel's evil, the Jews, to believe conspiracies about Jews, about the Holocaust, about, gay people, things like that. Even other things too, COVID, teaching our young people to believe conspiracies like that. We need to keep speaking out and opposing these hard right people. We cannot give Groypers any leverage. These are Groypers. Groypers are these people that are like America first, isolationists, etc., etc. We cannot give Groypers if we're on the left, we cannot give Groypers any leverage. So this means we will have to side with people who, yes, are in MAGA, who are in the conservative movement, but we will have to side with them against these Groypers because Groypers have no place in politics. Carlson is one of the worst Groypers out there, as is Nick Fuentes. They have no place in politics. None. And they should not. So, in conclusion of this video, anybody who is going to be, speaking out against the likes of Carlson, I don't care if they're on the left or the right, I'm going to promote them. I'm going to promote them for this simple ally, for this allyship. Because at the end of the day, he has too much influence. And so does Nick Fuentes. And so many young men are following this. Carlson is a groomed version of Nick Fuentes. He's a groomed version of the Groyper hard right, movement that's poisoning the minds of young men. And at the end of the day, we don't buy it just because we can't be, giving him leverage just because he criticizes Trump on, let's say, starting a war for Iran, etc. At the end of the day, we know where he stands. We know where he stands. We know where he stands on all these issues. At the end of the day, he wants to move the right more right. And we can't allow that to happen. And we need to do everything we can to oppose it. Thank you for watching. Javier here, tuning out.